It was an ordinary Tuesday evening at St. Catherine's Hospital, the kind of night when the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the halls echoed with the sounds of busy nurses' shoes tapping against the polished linoleum. For Dr. Emily Rhodes, it seemed like another routine shift in the ER, where nothing particularly strange ever happened. But for some, the night would be anything but ordinary. A patient named Alice Thompson had just been admitted under urgent care. She was in her mid-40s, with dark eyes that were unusually wide with terror. It was an emergency, but not one that was immediately life-threatening. Or so it seemed. The initial diagnosis: severe dehydration and exhaustion. Alice had a strange look on her face. She wasn't the first person to walk into the ER exhausted after days of work, but her eyes held something unsettling. Something that sent chills down Dr. Rhodes' spine, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. Dr. Emily Rhodes tried to focus as she examined Alice's chart. The woman had no significant medical history, which, in her line of work, was often more of a red flag than a comfort. You see, it's the patients who have something to hide, patients with missing medical records, patients with unexplained symptoms, that are often the ones that bring the most danger. Alice's blood pressure was high, and her heart rate was erratic. But her symptoms seemed normal. She wasn't in distress, she just seemed off. "I'm just so tired," Alice whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, you don't understand. They're going to get me. They're already here." Dr. Rhodes shook her head, trying to refocus. Was this another case of exhaustion coupled with anxiety? Or was it something more? Alice reached for Dr. Rhodes' arm, gripping it tightly with her clammy fingers. "Do you hear that?" Alice asked, eyes wide and unblinking. "The whispers, they're in the walls. I can hear them, I can feel them getting closer." Dr. Rhodes tried to brush it off as a symptom of stress, but something inside had told her that this wasn't just a psychological issue. She could see the fear in Alice's eyes, and it was real, too real. Before she could respond, Alice went rigid in the bed, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. A quick glance at the heart monitor revealed that her pulse had spiked to dangerous levels. "We need to get a sedative," Dr. Rhodes ordered, trying to keep her cool as the adrenaline started to course through her veins. Nurses rushed to administer medication, but Alice's body went limp before they could get the needle in. The last thing she whispered was, "It's already too late. They are here." The ER room seemed to grow colder. Dr. Rhodes noticed the odd shift in the atmosphere. The hospital that had once felt so familiar, so safe, now felt unnerving. It was like the walls themselves were pressing in, closing the hospital into a dark, oppressive space. After Alice had been sedated, Dr. Rhodes tried to shake off the sense of dread hanging in the air. She double-checked the monitors, confirmed Alice was stable, and made a mental note to check in with her later. But something felt wrong, too wrong. As the minutes passed, the usual hum of the hospital started to fade into an eerie silence. There were fewer footsteps in the halls, fewer voices from the staff. It was as if the entire building had gone still. Dr. Rhodes walked through the darkened corridors, the overhead lights flickering intermittently. Her stomach churned with unease. The nurse's station was quiet. The usual noise of pagers, phone calls, and the hurried shuffle of staff was gone. A shiver ran down her spine. Suddenly, a sound. A scraping noise from the dark hallway ahead. "Hello?" Dr. Rhodes called out, her voice echoing. No response. Her heart began to race as she took a hesitant step forward, but as she turned the corner, her foot caught on something. She stumbled forward, barely catching herself against the wall. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Alice. But Alice wasn't supposed to be awake. She was supposed to be resting. The woman was standing at the end of the hallway, her face pressed against the wall. Her eyes were wide and unblinking. The same terror from before was written all over her features, but now, it was as if she had completely lost her mind. "Alice!" Dr. Rhodes called softly, taking a step toward her. Don't come any closer," Alice whispered. Her voice was faint, but it was filled with sheer panic. "They'll get you too. They are watching. They are in the walls. They are in the air. They are in the rooms. What are you talking about? Dr. Rhodes asked, trying to remain calm. But before Alice could answer, she fell to the floor with a loud thud, her body convulsing violently. The lights flickered once more, and when they came back on, Dr. Rhodes saw something that made her blood run cold. Alice wasn't alone. There, standing at the foot of Alice's bed, was a figure. At first, Dr. Rhodes thought it was just another member of the medical team, but then she noticed the figure's twisted, unnatural stance. The figure wasn't human. Its body seemed to distort and contort unnaturally, its limbs unnervingly long. Its face was hidden, but the silhouette was haunting, too tall, too thin. The figure didn't move, but Dr. Rhodes could feel its presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. "Alice, stay still," Dr. Rhodes whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm going to get help." But the figure did not respond. It just stood there, as if it were watching them. That's when Dr. Rhodes noticed something else, something terrifying. The walls were shifting. The hospital itself seemed to be alive, pulsing with an unnatural energy. The air smelled stale, thick, almost like it had been sealed off from the outside world for years. Dr. Rhodes turned back to Alice. Her body was still writhing on the floor, her eyes wide with a fear that couldn't be described. "They are coming for you," Alice rasped. "You should never have come here. It's too late." A sudden realization hit Dr. Rhodes like a bolt of lightning. She remembered something from years ago. A nurse, a friend of hers from long ago, had mentioned strange disappearances. People who went missing inside the hospital. No explanations, no leads. They just vanished, without a trace. Dr. Rhodes quickly accessed the hospital's internal systems, hoping to find something, anything to explain what was happening. As she dug deeper, a chilling pattern emerged, an undercurrent of dark events tied to the hospital's past. Every few years, a new group of patients would arrive, and strange things would start to happen. Staff would report hearing voices in the walls, hearing footsteps in the dark. Equipment would malfunction. But the most disturbing part, the patients, every single one of them, would experience hallucinations, delusions, and panic attacks. They all described the same thing: whispers, shadows, figures in the dark. And then, they would disappear. Dr. Rhodes scrolled through the files, her fingers trembling as she read more about the strange phenomena. She came across a file marked classified, a patient named Evelyn Carter, who had disappeared under similar circumstances 10 years ago. She clicked open the file, and her eyes widened in shock. Evelyn Carter had been a nurse. She had gone missing one night during her shift, and despite extensive investigations, no one had ever found her. But the file had a note: "Proceed with caution. The presence in the hospital is real. It's not just a hallucination." Dr. Rhodes stood frozen in place, staring at the file. Her heart pounded in her chest. The whispers were real. The shadows were real. The hospital was haunted. But not in the traditional sense. Something darker, something far more sinister had taken root in the walls. As she turned around, the figure was gone. And so was Alice. The room was empty. Her breathing came in quick, shallow gasps as the lights flickered once more. She didn't know where Alice had gone, or where the figure had vanished to. But she knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening, it was far from over. And if she didn't find the truth, it might be her turn next. Dr. Emily Rhodes' heart pounded as the darkness of the hospital seemed to press in on her. Alice was gone. The figure in the hallway had disappeared without a trace. The hospital that she had trusted for years now felt like a trap, a place where unseen forces controlled the fate of every soul inside its walls. As Emily walked through the eerily quiet halls, she could hear her own breath. The oppressive silence had descended like a thick fog, filling the empty spaces and wrapping her in a sense of isolation. Her mind raced. Was it possible? Had Alice been taken by whatever had been haunting the hospital? What had happened to the nurse, Evelyn Carter, 10 years ago? The file she had found on Evelyn was no accident. Someone, or something, had made sure the truth had been buried. But now, Dr. Rhodes couldn't unsee what she had uncovered. The shadows in the walls were real, and they were closing in. Dr. Rhodes had known Alice was terrified when she was admitted. What she didn't know was that Alice had been a part of the very thing that had haunted the hospital years ago, a cover-up of strange and unnatural events. But Alice hadn't been the only one. There had been others before her. Evelyn Carter, a nurse who had vanished from the same hospital 10 years ago under similar circumstances. The hospital had been flooded with complaints, patients, staff, visitors, all reporting the same haunting sensations: whispers in the walls, strange figures moving in the dark, inexplicable disappearances. But every single claim was dismissed as a hallucination or mass hysteria. Emily's hands trembled as she opened the file labeled Classified, Evelyn Carter, Case Closed. Her mind raced through the memories of her first year as a resident. She had heard the stories about Evelyn, a bright, young nurse who had been on duty one night and simply vanished. Her family, the police, and the hospital administration had all searched, but Evelyn was never found. There were no traces of foul play. No blood, no signs of struggle. Just nothing. But then, Emily stumbled upon the most chilling part of the file. A note, handwritten in the margins. The presence is real. We must suppress the truth at all costs. Emily's breath caught in her throat. What presence? And why had it been covered up? The hospital administrators had never mentioned it. In fact, they had always insisted that Evelyn had just run away. It was easier to write her off as a person who had simply left than admit the terrifying truth: that something was happening within these walls, something dark and sinister. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway flickered. Emily turned quickly, her heart racing. She was no longer alone. She could feel it. Whispers. At first, it was faint, like a murmur coming from far away. Then it grew louder, too loud to ignore. It was a voice, low and guttural, speaking in a language Emily couldn't understand. The whispering seemed to come from every direction. She couldn't tell if it was the walls or the floors. It felt as though the very building itself was alive, watching her, waiting for her next move. With a quick breath, Emily ran toward the ER doors, her mind desperate for clarity. But when she entered the room, she found nothing. No Alice. No figure. Only the eerie hum of machines that had been left running without a soul to tend them. In the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed. Emily turned to find a shadow standing at the door, a familiar face. It was Dr. Peter Edwards, one of the senior surgeons who had worked at St. Catherine's for decades. His face was pale, and his eyes were bloodshot, as though he hadn't slept in days. "I thought you were gone, too," Emily whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "Where have you been?" Peter stepped into the room, his movements stiff. He had a grim expression on his face, the weight of something heavy hanging over him. "Emily, I need to tell you everything. I know what's happening here, and I've known for a long time. It's not just the hospital. It's the entire institution." Dr. Edwards led Emily to a small, unused storage room in the back of the hospital. Dr. Edwards led Emily to a small, unused storage room in the back of the hospital. The air inside was thick with dust, and the shelves were cluttered with old, forgotten equipment. But the real shock came when Peter unlocked a hidden door at the back of the room. Behind the door was a narrow staircase that descended into the bowels of the hospital. Emily hesitated for a moment, her pulse quickening, but Peter urged her forward. "Down here," he said, "is where it all started. This is where the truth was buried." The hospital built its success on what happened down here. As they descended the stairs, the temperature dropped noticeably. The walls grew damp, and the flickering lights cast long, ominous shadows. Finally, they reached a large, cavernous room. The walls were lined with old medical equipment, but it wasn't the equipment that caught Emily's attention. It was the rows of old filing cabinets, each one labeled with names and dates. Peter moved quickly to one of the cabinets and pulled it open, revealing a series of old case files. Emily's eyes widened as she glanced at the labels. Classified, Patient 051. Classified, Dr. M. Grayson. The names meant nothing to her, but there was an unsettling familiarity to them. The hospital was built on more than just medical care, Peter continued, his voice low. It was built on something dark. The experiments, the disappearances, the patients who never left. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Experiments? What kind of experiments? Peter's face twisted in anguish. The hospital was involved in testing, but not the kind of testing you're familiar with. These were experiments to tap into something otherworldly. They thought they could harness dark forces. The people who disappeared were part of it. They were trying to open a door to something beyond our understanding. Alice! Emily gasped, stepping backward. What happened to you? Alice opened her mouth, and a voice, not her own, came out, deep and echoing. You should never have come here. You cannot escape. The shadows are already here. The walls seemed to pulse, the air growing thick with a malevolent energy. Emily's body froze as the temperature dropped to a freezing point. Alice's form shimmered, flickering between her human self and the grotesque figure she had become. But Emily wasn't afraid. Not anymore. With a burst of strength, she grabbed a nearby metal rod and swung it at Alice. The creature screeched as the rod connected, but the force of the blow didn't stop it. It only seemed to make it angrier. Suddenly, Peter stepped forward. He held up a small, ancient-looking pendant in his hand, and as he whispered something under his breath, the room seemed to tremble. The figure of Alice shrieked, her body convulsing in pain. "Emily, now!" Peter yelled. With a quick motion, Emily plunged the rod into the heart of the dark entity. There was an explosion of light and sound, and then silence. Alice collapsed to the floor, her body returning to its human form, lifeless. The next day, the hospital was finally forced to confront the horrors it had hidden for decades. The truth came to light, about the experiments, the disappearances, and the spirits that had been trapped within the walls. Peter was arrested, but not before revealing all the details to the authorities. The hospital administration was dismantled, and the building was closed. The dark forces that had once controlled the hospital were eradicated. As for Alice, her body was found in the wreckage of the underground rooms, her story at last being told. The victims who had vanished over the years were finally given names, their families notified. The truth was exposed, and justice was served. But as Emily walked away from the ruins of St. Catherine's, she couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows hadn't gone completely. The hospital might have been shut down, but someone, still lingered in the darkness, waiting for the next chapter to begin. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling true crime story, make sure to like and subscribe for more gripping tales from the depths of mystery. Stay tuned for the next episode, because the shadows are never too far away.